really excited and looking forward to this stop because today we're in Collinsville, Illinois at the Cahokia Mounds State Park. Cahokia was sort of the largest civilization north of Mexico in pre-Columbian times. They flourished from about 900 to about 1300 AD. And then they went away. They went away before Columbus landed, but not too much before. So we're going to explore the area today. Really looking forward to it. Here you can sort of get an idea of how this looked. You can see in this middle picture, that mound, this part right here, that's the central mound that's there now. But you can see all around it, it was really a city. Really a thriving city for hundreds of years. It's a short path to get to it. The Mississippian culture was extant for hundreds of years as well in the whole eastern and southeastern United States. And in fact, there were really extensive trade routes in the area. They have apparently found shark's teeth buried in the area here. So that's pretty good because this is nearly 1,000 miles from the ocean. But they traded, all up and down the coast and inland. So it really was a whole civilization. There's this sort of idea that the Native Americans in pre-Columbian times were sort of few and far between, but that's really not true. The Americas really were fairly extensively populated in ways that we don't quite understand or realize. This was abandoned pre-Columbian, so before 1500. But what's interesting is, of course, the people still continue to live here. And when European explorers came later on, when the first European explorers came, they found that the area was heavily populated. Everything up and down the Mississippi River was really heavily populated. And then about 100 years later, European explorers came back again, and the place was almost empty. And it just had to do with the disease. It's really the disease that ravaged the Native Americans is honestly unimaginable. You can compare it to the Black Death, but it might even be greater than that. Because the Black Death in Europe, I think, killed about a third of the population. But there were certainly at least places in the Americas where it was killing greater than 90% of the population. Here we are at the stairs. What's really interesting about the way that disease did, in fact, wipe out the Native Americans is that we kind of figure that the Native Americans had to have contact with Europeans in order to get diseases, but they didn't. In fact, when Francisco Pizarro conquered the Incas, Pizarro was the first European that the Incas had seen. The Europeans had had contact with Native Americans on the coast, and just from that contact, it spread from one group to another. And so the Native Americans would get smallpox or whatever it might be, without ever having seen a European. It really is amazing. There's a book that I read called 1491, and it talks about the Americas before Columbus and then right after the Europeans got there. That's a lot of exercise. So the view sort of halfway up. I guess is a good exercise spot. Well, here we are at the top. Oh, you can see St. Louis in the distance. It's the Gateway Arch. This is looking to the east. It says where those palisades down there are. That was about where the wall around the city was. You know, one thing that's interesting that you don't think about with a mound like this is the water situation of the mound. You're putting all this dirt here, and then you're building things on top of it. And in fact, when you get a lot of rain, the mound will swell up. And so you really had to account for all the rain that was going to come throughout the year and build with a mind to that, with that the height of the mound is going to go up and down throughout the year. You can see a creek down there on the horizon, or a river. I think that's called Canteen Creek. That's not the Mississippi. We're still a few miles away from the Mississippi River. Might be a man-made canal or something. It's very, very straight. It's not just the one mound. There are a lot of mounds, like this one here. They're really all over. I think there are actually hundreds of mounds in the area. Because as I said earlier, this was really a whole city. It was not just a mound like in Moundsville or in Miamisburg, Ohio. This was really a civilization. In fact, in the year 1100, The area here, which is just near the Mississippi River, just a few miles away, this whole area, there were more people living here than lived in London, England. This is called the Fox Mound. Here's a good view of the mound from kind of a long way off. You can see people walking up there on the mound, and so you can get kind of the scale there. So I got to say, this was really great coming here and seeing this mound. That's really extremely impressive. We've seen the other mounds in other areas, but this was really on a different scale with a whole civilization here. There's so much more to learn about pre-Columbian America. It's really worth looking into. I especially recommend the book 1491, which talks about the immediate time before and after the Europeans came to the Americas. Great book.